Ciara was adopted when she was 18 months old, and from her reports, life was pretty good until her adopted mother died of breast cancer. After her mother's death, she had multiple hospitalizations, difficulties in school, and many medication trials. After years of finding no solution to Ciara's behavioral and mental health issues, her grandmother admitted her to residential treatment. When I first began working with Ciara, her speech was slurred and her movement was slow and awkward from heavy medication. Despite the volume of medication she was prescribed, she still appeared to struggle with hallucinations, difficulty grooming herself, and bizarre behavior that made interactions with others difficult. Because verbal communication and relating to others was challenging for Ciara, I was assigned as her primary therapist. Shortly after her admission to the residential treatment center, her grandmother decided that she could not come back home and would need residential care into adulthood. Because Ciara was too young for an adult facility, she would remain at the residential center where I worked for 2 years, awaiting placement at a long-term care facility. During these 2 years, Ciara and I met every week for art therapy. Ciara had a treatment plan outlining her goals for treatment. These goals were focused around social skill building, symptom reduction, and processing her grief. During the 2 years at our treatment facility, Ciara's medications were reduced and refined to address her issues more specifically. Her slurred speech and her slow movements improved over time, but she made it clear she still wasn't interested in talking about any of her goals or her past experience or her progress in treatment. When I attempted to engage her in conversation around goals or treatment, she stared at me blankly as if I hadn't said a thing. This made it really difficult for me to report on the outcomes of treatment or find ways to bill for our time spent together in therapy. Despite her reluctance to talk about her goals, Ciara was organized and prolific in our art therapy sessions. Each week, she would show up with a written grocery list and ask for my help to make the items on the list out of art materials: strawberries, chicken, Pepsi, salad, and spaghetti one week, taco shells, ground beef, lettuce, tomatoes, and cheese the next. We would read her list together, then work to create each item from materials in the art room. We used a lot of tape and foil, yarn made great noodles, and we perfected our chicken using tape and foil and sealing it into plastic wrap, using actual meat cartons from the cafeteria. I enjoyed meeting with Ciara and seeing what her list contained each week, but I worried that we weren't working on any recognizable treatment goals. Anytime I brought up treatment goals or asked for her perspective on what she struggled with, my inquiry was met with silence, and Ciara would go back to crafting her grocery items. Ciara eventually expanded her weekly grocery lists and began to make takeout foods from restaurants. She and I created Chinese food to be delivered to her room on the unit after our session that included shrimp lo mein made from twine, pink foam shrimp shapes, and construction paper green onions. She moved steadily between grocery lists and takeout menus, explaining to me that some nights she just didn't feel like cooking, so she ordered out. She was very dedicated to her process, and I was intrigued but clueless as to the deeper meaning of all the food we made together. After a year of working together, Ciara began making office supplies: a cell phone, a laptop computer, a coffee maker, a wall-mounted house phone, and a set of keys. She outfitted her room on the unit with these items. From my observations, she appeared to be setting up a home office or a business. I knew Ciara was in a deep creative process, and I trusted this process was what she needed to do, even if I wasn't sure what the larger goal was. About a year and a half into our work together, her grandmother visited the facility and randomly shared that Ciara's late mother had planned and catered parties. This was a profound bit of information for me, and it shed light on what Ciara had been doing in the art studio for the past year and a half. Suddenly I understood her work as recreating memories of her mother and the familiar process of planning and grocery shopping that happened often in her home. Ciara had been doing grief work all along in an intuitive way that didn't need explanation. She had been following her instincts to make lists and groceries and to order takeout when she didn't feel like cooking. Her work in the art studio allowed her to mourn the loss of her mother, but also mourn the loss of the life she would never have. Ciara knew that she was headed to a long-term residential facility after her stay at our agency, And in the art studio, she used our time together to enjoy her imagined life as a party planner. It was through her artwork that she was able to mourn the loss of her mother and the loss of her life as she imagined it, and it was my job to trust the nonlinear process of her art.